It's time to take off your clothes, enjoy clothes-free living, and join us for Naked, Nudists, and Naturists.
Welcome to Naked, Nudists, and Naturists, the show that celebrates clothes-free living for all. I'm your host, Frank Stone.
And I'm your correspondent, Lisa Monroe, and I'll be reporting on all things within the Naturist community. So it's time to get naked and join us.
And enjoy clothes-free living on Naked, Nudists, and Naturists. Welcome in to Naked, Nudists, and Naturists, episode 3 today. We're glad you're with us. The place where we celebrate clothes-free living for all of the right reasons. We always say this, everybody always says this, we were born naked. For heaven's sakes, why did we ever get dressed? It's just much better to live your life without clothes whenever and wherever possible. Many places in our society, it's still not possible. If you work in the corporate world, I recommend not showing up naked for work on your first day, because your first day might be your last day. That's just the way it works in corporate world USA, corporate world globe, I guess you could say. Also recommend not trying that at the grocery store or when you visit your local police station to fill out paperwork. You might want to have clothes on then. In fact, I'll just say it flat out, definitely have clothes on then. Let's not play around with words here. But when possible, the clothes-free living is the way to go. And social naturism, of course, is that's when you're getting together with other people, like-minded people. Never sexual. Never, ever, ever sexual. That's not what naturism is about. And if you find yourself in that mode, we are human beings. As a man, I'm attracted to women, and women are attracted to men, and lots of other combinations out there. But if you're in a social naturism situation and you find yourself thinking, well, that gal over there is pretty good looking. Look at the whatevers and the this and that. It's probably time to remove yourself from that situation, at least temporarily, and maybe permanently. You have to make that decision. But it's not intended to be a sexual situation. And if it starts to become so, get out of there. Don't let yourself be caught up in that world at all. There are places for that. There are clubs you can go to that cater to that. They're checking each other out and hitting each other up and flirting and going out on dates and maybe dunking in the back and exchanging partners. If that's what you're into, then that's what you're into. We're not here to criticize or condemn. We're only here to tell you what naturism is about, and it's not that. It's enjoying the clothes-free living that we believe you were intended to live. Again, born without clothes, that ought to be a clue right there. If it weren't, we would have been born with three-piece suits and evening gowns and jewelry and shoes and socks and everything else. But we were born naked, and when you enjoy the clothes-free living for all of the right reasons, I've seen this billions of times, seemingly billions of times. It makes you more relaxed, more at peace with yourself, more confident, definitely a better body image about yourself, because you're not worried about that. If you're waiting to get the perfect body before you take your clothes off, you will be waiting forever, because you will never have the perfect body. It doesn't matter what you see on TV or in the movies or in Hollywood. Those are all fake. Some of those are put together by plastic surgeons. Others are put together by proper lighting and proper camera angles. Don't try to replicate that stuff. You'll be there forever and ever and never get your clothes off. So yes, if you are new to this, maybe to start off, taking your clothes off in your home and walking around. And eventually maybe invite a friend over, a trusting friend, and tell that friend in advance, oh, by the way, I'd like to try this. And I read an article recently from a woman who said that she discovered naturism while in college. In her dorm room, there were 4 gals there, and they just got in the habit of, it's been a long day of classes and research and papers and library time. I'm back in my dorm room now, the clothes are coming off, and nobody thought anything odd of it. Nobody thought anything weird of it. And then it hit her one night. The 4 of us are sitting around talking, totally naked, and nobody has made an issue out of it. This naturism thing is pretty good, and it really is. And before I make a couple of other comments about that, let me tell you a little bit about the show and what's going on today. First of all, this show, Naked, Nudists, and Naturists, we drop a brand new episode every Saturday morning, at least for now. We will see if we can keep up with that schedule, but that's our plan. Every Saturday morning, we'll drop a new episode for you. And you can find us all over the podcast world, or just hit up our website, nakednudistandnaturist.com, and every link will be there. Every time we put a show up, the link will be there, so you can find it fairly easily. We do encourage your comments and questions. If you have anything to say, anything you want to ask, we are not experts here. We will not proclaim that. Did go to college for 158 years, it seems like, but never studied naturism at a formal level. But I've lived the life since birth as often as possible. And every time I was clothed, it was just a matter until I would not be clothed, whether I had to wait till I got home or to a resort or to a club or whatever I was doing. So I've lived the life since birth, literally since birth. And I've learned a few things along the way, but I'm not an expert. Lisa Monroe, our correspondent, discovered naturism about 20 years ago, and she's never looked back and has lived the life for the last 20-plus years. So if you have any questions, let us know. We'd also like to hear your comments. What has naturism done for you? How did you find it? How much more at peace with yourself are you now for having discovered it and living the life? And the way you can do that is by email nakedforevermore@gmail.com. That's nakedforevermore@gmail.com. Well, on today's show, we will have correspondent Lisa Monroe weighing in very shortly. She has a weekly report for you on the world of naturism. And we'll have part one of an interview that I did with Stéphane Deschênes. I call him the godfather of naturism because he's been around for a very long time. And to me, the leading advocate in the world for the lifestyle, for naturism. He has his own podcast, the Naturist Living Show. You can find that fairly easily out there. He also has his own naturist club that he owns, and that's Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park up near Toronto. If you're in that area or if you're visiting, stop in, say hello, and tell him thank you for promoting the world of naturism. He's also the current president of the International Naturist Foundation. So he's a big wheel, a big deal in the world of naturism. And we appreciate his time. We'll have part one of my interview with him today and part two of my interview with him on episode 4. Now, before we get to Lisa Monroe and her correspondence report, just a couple of other comments on naturism. I've been doing it so long, and I understand the lifestyle well enough that I can almost always tell when I meet somebody if they are into naturism. And maybe I can't tell right away. Often I can, but it might take a while, a few meetings, a few conversations before I pick up on the fact that they have this inner peace. They have this inner glow. They have this inner, really self-confident feeling about themselves as well as their body. Now, I never ask anybody about that. First of all, if they want to tell me, they will, and many have. But also, I don't want to be wrong. Hey, are you a naturist? And they'll look at me like, what? We don't want any awkward situations. But I can usually tell when somebody is into the naturist life. They have a peace about themselves. And I've always felt, and this goes back to when I was growing up as a kid, and it's been with me ever since, the happiest families, the most peaceful families, the families that function the best are naturist families. Because all of that other junk is eliminated. Mom, how do I look in this? Is this good enough? What do you think of these jeans? What do you think of, I can't believe you won't buy me that piece of clothing. All that junk is eliminated. And you just live the clothes-free life as a family. I've talked to a lot of parents who don't advertise or even advocate the naturism lifestyle, yet they practice it in their home. They don't necessarily grab the quickest towel or the quickest whatever to cover themselves up out of embarrassment. They just say, hey, being naked is part of life. And when you accept that, life gets a whole lot better and more peaceful right away. Well, let's get to correspondent Lisa Monroe. Let's find out what she has to say this week on the world of naturism. Well, good morning, Lisa Monroe. How are you today?
Good morning, Frank. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Not bad. You're
Good.
all extra naked today, which is really the only way to go in life, right?
Absolutely. I really, really, really hate to have to get up and get dressed and go anywhere. So nice way to live.
Are you basically you never have clothes on when you're home? It's only when you go out in public places?
Yep, that's pretty much it. It's, it seems like just a waste of time. I truly do enjoy being naked. So it's, what's the point of putting on clothes if you're the only one here? And if there's someone here who's into that as well, then that's even better. But
Mm.
um, it's just, it's more comfortable. I've always felt more comfortable. I've told you before, when I used to come home from work, I'd literally be unlocking the door and unbuttoning things as I went through the doorway. So committed to this, yes, indeed.
That's right. I talked to a lady who lives in Brazil, and she said you can actually be naked in your front yard of your home, even though it's in 100% view of anybody and everybody who's looking or walking by or driving by. And I questioned her about that. She said, "Well, what exactly is your problem with that?" And I'm thinking, "Well, I don't have a problem with it. It's just in the United States we do. We cannot do that, or we'll probably have some issues in the neighborhood minimally, or maybe a visit by the local authorities." And then also in Germany, it's my understanding they can at public parks just take it all off and take the raisin. So why are we so far behind Germany and Brazil? Do you think?
I think it does come back to the way this country was settled. If you look back at history and the reasons that naturism became was banned in so many places, it seems to be a very natural thing when people are being open and honest about art and music, and and the expression of emotion and joy. But then suddenly a new sort of movement will come along where the bodies become shamed. It may be a governmental reason, it may be a religious reason. And so we had the Puritans. And when the Puritans came to this country, they were basically some of the first founders. And I think our focus, our culture was based on that very restrictive lifestyle that they had. And I just think we've never been able to get past that point.
Sad but true. And you look at little kids running around and naked as jaybirds when they're a year or two old and not a care in the world. And then somebody tells them, "Oh, you probably should cover up," or "Oh, you're a little overweight," or "Oh," they just make. And then the kids develop these body image issues, maybe later in elementary school or certainly by middle school. And then they cover up for a while, and then they either come back or they don't. But apparently, they don't have those issues in Brazil and Germany. So I don't know what the deal is.
No, and I think it comes back to a self-awareness and a belief that you're not going to offend anyone else. How could you be offensive to anyone else if everyone else feels the same?
Right.
But in our country, I mean, I knew a family once who was from France, and they were children. They had children who were 10, 12. In the evening, they were given a glass of wine with dinner. Now, they watered the wine down a little bit, but their belief was it's wine, it's nothing bad. You teach them the right way to handle it, to grow up with it thinking it's nothing special, that it's a good thing, and they will be less likely to abuse it in the future. So, because they've grown up with a healthy attitude, and we have probably not given that healthy attitude about our bodies to uh, anyone in this country anytime. And when they do show people who are less clothed, it's always in some sort of, sexual connotation. It's a
Yeah.
sexy football cheerleader. I mean, for heaven's sakes, there was a hamburger commercial not too a few years ago that had a very scantily clad, very sexually oriented woman on it. And that's not the image to present to kids for a body. So we need to be smarter about what we do, but I don't know whether we can be in this country, at least for a while.
Yeah, yeah, we certainly aren't now. Well, I wanted to talk to you today. You remember Stéphane Deschênes owns Bear Oaks Naturist Park near Toronto, and also has his own podcast, the Naturist Living Show. He wrote a blog article, I believe, in 2014, so 9 years ago, about people, particularly women, but men too, throwing sarongs on at naturist parks or nudist beaches or facilities like that. And he had a significant problem with it, as do I. But what is your take on that? Everybody's naked except two or three people have a sarong on. What's going on with that?
Well, when I first read that article, I have to admit that I thought sarong. What's wrong with the sarong? And I guess from a female standpoint as opposed to a male standpoint, then you think of, oh, they're accessorizing. It's like putting on a pair of earrings.
Hmm.
But as I read through the article and thought about it, and then I realized that he has a point that the second, and it comes back to that always being body shamed when people were allowed, like during the Renaissance, to be more open and the body was celebrated and so forth. And then, you know, that whole Victorian movement comes in, the Puritans come in, and suddenly it's body shaming again. So it always comes back to body shaming. And the same way with the Greeks and Romans, that the Judeo Christian kind of Muslim influence that came into the ancient world kind of negated all of that. I mean, no more naked Olympics. So I think that, when you start to begin to think, I need to cover up or I need to do this, you're beginning to say, I'm going to step back and be different. I don't want to be as exposed.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens. And as he mentioned in the article, of course, then you can get into the status thing again. I have more money than you. That's why I have this really expensive designer sarong, and you
Hmm.
have that cheap rag you got at the Salvation Army, third or fourth hand. In fact, it's still wrinkled and dirty from when you bought it. And now we've lost the whole naturism thing. Now it's not about the joy of clothes free living. It's back to the status thing, which naturism is 100% in the opposite direction of, right?
Exactly, and we've talked about this before. In that, when you walk onto a naturist facility and the clothes come off, you don't know who the person is you're talking to. So the equality level is much higher. So it doesn't matter status. It doesn't matter anything about those people. You are equals as far as your enjoyment of being free and open with your body and your mind and your relationships with people on a completely different level.
Yeah, as it should be. I remember the first time I went to a naturist resort, I took my clothes off and then I walked around the park for a bit and I thought, am I really doing this outside and other people are going to be around? It's one thing to be in your home or at a beach down the road a little bit, far from people, but this was right there and people were arriving at their campsites and they were clothed. They hadn't, gotten undressed yet. And I thought, if I tried this anywhere else, I'd probably end up, with the authorities, as I mentioned before. But just walking around and, everybody's waving hi. Hey, how you doing? Came up and talked to me. They took their clothes off too. 100% normal and natural.
Hmm.
But you are opposed to the whole sarong thing as a cover up?
Well, like I said, at my first initial reaction was, oh, they're just, trying to be trendy or cute. But, no, I began as I read through and saw some of the excuses that they were using, and also Stephane's rationality about this is that we are unfortunately, as humans, we are easily led down a garden path,
Yep.
and suddenly something becomes trendy and everybody has to do it. So suddenly it was like, oh my god, she looks cute in that, or oh wow, he put that on, so you know what, I'm
Yes.
going to do that too. And the next thing we know, we're all clothed again, and that's kind of not the thing we're supposed to be doing, because this is not about being naked per se. It's not like going, oh, look at me, I'm not wearing anything. This is about how you feel about yourself, and how you relate to the rest of the world and everything around you. And it sounds very zen like in a lot of ways, but it really is actually that. It is something that's very to be a very personal but also a very community experience.
Yeah, I've even seen women, just walking up and down the street, going for a walk for exercise, and they'll have a sweater or a sarong tied around their fanny. Well, I know right away they think their backside's too big, so they're trying to cover it up.
Exactly.
And there we go with the whole body image thing. So if we throw the cover ups or sarongs into naturism, it's the same exact thing, isn't it? You're
It
trying to cover
is.
something up instead of living naturally.
And I would assume that most of the women who are putting these sarongs on are ones whose tummy's not flat enough to suit them, or they're sagging in places they don't want to sag. And then again, that's they're being body conscious. And being body conscious negates what this whole naturism is about. It's supposed to be about just being you and not having any of those trappings around you.
Yeah, if we wait till we have the perfect body before we take our clothes off, we will never have our clothes off. It's just
No.
not going to happen.
I would have given up a long time
Yeah,
ago.
exactly. Same with just about everybody. Well, always good to talk to you, Lisa Monroe, our correspondent. Any plans this week for a naturist resort, nude beach? What are you doing this week?
No, unfortunately, no nude beach or nature's resort. Probably home and probably naked.
Well, that's
In
a
fact,
very good
not
start.
probably will be. How about that?
Maybe get some sun in the backyard or on the deck,
That
I hope.
sounds like a very good idea.
All right, always good to talk to you, Lisa Monroe, our naturist correspondent. Lisa, have a great week. We'll talk to you next time.
You too, Frank. Bye bye.
Bye. Isn't she absolutely great, Lisa Monroe? We're very fortunate to have her on our show. Naked Nudists and Naturists drop a brand new show for you every Saturday morning. Keep in touch with us through our website, nakednudistandnaturist.com, and also our email address, nakedforevermore@gmail.com. But Lisa Monroe told me a story years ago. For a long time, she was a little bit stressed out in life and work and personal life, and darn it, and this wasn't going well, and that wasn't going well, and she discovered naturism. The clothes came off, the stress went away, the calmness set in, and she's been the happiest person on earth ever since then, 20 plus years. Naturism does work. It's not weird. Oh boy, a bunch of naked people. It's time to have a big party. No, not at all. And if you do that, then you're on your own, but that's not naturism. That's something else. Naturism is all about living the clothes-free life and being your true self, not faking it, not having on designer jeans to impress somebody. No, no, and no. You have nothing on, they have nothing on. Now we just talk and communicate about the world around us. Well, you're listening to Naked, Nudists, and Naturists. We appreciate you being with us for episode 3. As I've mentioned a couple of times, a brand new episode every Saturday morning. You can check that out and get ready for the weekend. And our website again, nakednudistandnaturists.com. And our email address, we want to hear from you early and often, nakedforevermore@gmail.com. Well, let's get to part 1 of my interview that I did with Stéphane Deschênes. As I mentioned, he is the owner of Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park near Toronto. Make sure you stop in and say hello. He also has his own podcast, the Naturist Living Show. You can find that wherever podcasts are. And he's also the current president of the International Naturist Federation. So let's get to it right now. Part 1 of my interview with Stéphane Deschênes. So let's bring him to the show this morning and find out what's going on in his life and in the world of naturism. From Canada, Stéphane Deschênes. Good morning, Stéphane. How are you today? Did I do okay on the semi-French pronunciation of your name?
You did very well. Yes, very well.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right.
And even more challenging than my name is the town, which is East Gwillimbury.
Holy cow.
So that's where Bear Oaks is located.
All right.
Actually, if you want a little side note, that's not very relevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Gwillimbury is named after Lady Gwillim. Lady Gwillim Gwillim is the maiden name of the wife of John Graves Simcoe, who really founded Toronto. He was the first representative of the Crown to found Toronto and what was then became Upper Canada. And what's interesting about Elizabeth Gwillim is that her middle name is Posthuma. So she was Elizabeth Posthuma Gwillim because her mother died in childbirth. And I thought that was always kind of a big trip to put on a child, to basically name you Elizabeth, you killed your mother at birth, Gwillim, But,
well,
yeah.
Hopefully she did okay with that. I studied Spanish way back when. I even taught it, took it in college and all that good stuff. But French is literally a foreign language to me. The only exposure I've had to French, I lived in Detroit growing up, and we got Hockey Night in Canada, from the Windsor TV station.
Ah, yes.
Oh, yes.
A classic.
And I always enjoyed when they played in Montreal or the Montreal Forum. The PA announcer would say everything in French, and then he would say everything in English.
Right, yeah.
And it used to crack me up. I don't know any French word, but it was something like this. At least that's how it sounded to me as a kid. And then you would hear in perfect English, Montreal goal scored by number 10, Guy Lafleur. So he had that perfect French voice and he had the perfect American voice as well. So that's basically my limitations on French. So I hope I did okay on your name.
You did very well, thanks.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Let's get into everything today. Let's start with your Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. It's my understanding this is the 50th year, the 50th anniversary of the beginning of your park. Is that correct?
It did, yeah. It started in 1972 when Eric and June Jarvis purchased the land because they'd been members of another club called Glen Echo Park, and they had a disagreement with the owner, and so they decided to start their own. And yes, they purchased the land. They went through a number of iterations, including in between some textile periods, but it kept going back until my wife and I purchased it in 2006 and renamed it Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. It was called the New Forest when we bought it. The original name in 72 was the Toronto Helios Society, Helios meaning sunshine in Greek, basically, or sun god. I'd have to look that up, the exact meaning. But the New Forest was a name which I found problematic because when you Googled it, there is a very well-known national park in the UK called the New Forest. So it was a name that wasn't going to work very well. So that ended up being Bear Oaks. And speaking of French, you might wonder why Bear Oaks. Is it a property full of oaks without leaves?
No.
It's not. In fact, there are very few oaks. Most of the oaks that are on the property have been planted since we owned it.
Yeah.
And they're not very big trees. My last name, Deschênes, means of the oaks.
Oh.
And so that's the French in French. And so I was looking for a name that meant something. I needed the .com to be available. I needed it to be short.
Right.
I thought it would be nice if it had a letter that was at the top of the alphabet because people list things alphabetically.
Right.
And the bear, of course, was a play on words. So that's how we ended up with Bear Oaks. There's a little bit of a kind of a twist, little secret about knowing where it came from. That's not necessarily obvious.
Very good. Yeah, I didn't know any of that. And of course, for our listeners, to be clear, bear is clearly spelled Bare.
Yes, of
as
course.
you mentioned,
Yes.
it's not the animal a bear. But so just tell us, what's going on at your park this summer? Lots of celebrations, lots of parties. What's going on there?
Well, no, we're not making a big party. I mean, it's 50 years of. It was a bit tumultuous because Eric and June had a hard time financially making it work. They were building it from nothing. And in the 70s, it was really hard to promote naturism. You didn't have the internet to reach everybody really easily. You couldn't even run ads often. The newspapers would not take the ads, even if you were willing to pay for it, because that was such a shocking concept. So they sold, and somebody tried to develop a resort that didn't really work out, and then it sold to somebody who recreated, who remembered it and recreated the New Forest as a naturist park. But it was a little dated, and then we took over. So it's not 50 years of constant naturism, mostly naturism, but it's still 50 years of struggle to get to where we are now, because naturism has always struggled. It's always seen as something which is a bit of a out there, a little weird, a little unusual, even though when you really think about it, being in your natural state should not be so surprising and shocking. But in our society, we've developed something where the lack of clothing is very wrong in many people's minds. We're just trying to change that.
Any idea, and I don't want to get too far off of your park, I do want to talk a little bit more about that. And we're going to get into everything today, but let's just deviate for a minute. Any idea where that came from? You know, whenever it started hundreds of thousands of years ago, and of course the typical response from a lot of people, as you know, we were born without clothes on. So what's the big deal? Because apparently it is a big deal, because we were born without clothes, and then we quickly had to throw people threw clothes on us. So why did that happen? Any idea going back into the history of the research?
And there's a lot of theories, and of course you can only theorize. There's no way to prove a history.
Yeah.
Find a little bit of evidence. The body shame thing is really a few hundred years old.
Oh, yeah.
it's not recent. It is recent. It's not something that we've always had. Clothing obviously was, I'm sure, created as protection from the elements, perhaps during when uh, our ancestors traveled to cooler climates, or because of an ice age or something. Anyway, that clothing made a lot of sense. And I, what I, from what I've read, I think the shame came as a result of a few things. Initially, of course, we've always had this desire to elevate ourselves above others, especially when we were rulers and we had power or we had money. Still happens today. And so the people with more money could have nicer clothing, more comfortable, nicer fabrics, maybe brighter colors, things that were expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And with that development came, of course, people all striving to be superior to others by also having the better, shinier, whatever fabrics, so that they could show they were better than everybody else. Still something that happens today, right? We have the fancier brands, we have the nicer names. We're showing off our wealth and therefore theoretically our superiority, although we could certainly debate whether that's true or not. Where the shame came in, that's also an interesting thing. The Greeks and the Romans actually celebrated the human body, and you could see, and women were subjugated during that time as well. So what you often saw as women who were put down and treated as property. If you look at old Roman statues, you will see women that are heavily clothed and men that are nude because they celebrated the nude body. And when you get to the Middle Ages, suddenly the body is shameful, and you see that. Maybe it's the Catholic original sin, that kind of thing. Sex is something to be avoided except for procreation. And so now you reverse it. And when you look at painting from the Renaissance and the Middle Ages, you suddenly start to see the men are clothed and the women are nude.
Yeah, that's true.
Because of that. And uh, so that attitude certainly is in there. Also, when you get to the Industrial Revolution and the Victorian age,
Right.
we start to think that we know better than nature. And so we cover up nature, right? Nature is messy. Nature is not straight lines and flat planes. So we pave things and we build things that are square. And I think as part of that, the human body is seen as imperfect. It's our natural self, and we like to think of ourselves as now being beyond our natural self. So that's probably part of it too, and it's probably little bits of everything else. But that's what you read about, and that's probably where we got to be today. That we somehow have become ashamed, embarrassed, and even offended by our own image.
Yes, that'd be true. And the last time you were on, I told you the story of when I walked into a doctor's office, and it was at a hospital. There were probably literally 50 people in the room sitting around, and I walked in at one end, had to walk through all of these people to get to the desk. And as soon as I walked in, and I had learned the art and the skill of dressing up, as a school principal, a guy who was a public speaker, I always had to kind of sort of look my best. And admittedly, I spent a little more on clothes than maybe the average person. Not that I was into it, it's just I had to play the part, and I walked into the doctor's office as a non-medical person, and everybody in the room sat up straight, like, okay, there's somebody important who just walked in. And I noticed that, and I thought, what is wrong with these people? I'm just a patient like they are. And then it hit me, oh, yes, because of the way I'm dressed, and I had on a suit, a tie, nice shoes, and overcoat. It was wintertime, and the clothing I was wearing looked like $1 million. And I've replayed that in my mind many times. That's at least 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago. I thought, what if everybody were a naturist and everybody just lived their lives like that? Well, there wouldn't be any opportunity to do that, to walk in, unless you're built like Arnold Schwarzenegger or one of those guys. You just walk in and you're kind of like everybody else. Okay, there's another guy who just walked in, or there's another gal who just walked in. So whatever, I'm just going to go back to reading my book and waiting for the doctor. And there's a big difference between those two scenarios, and obviously you discovered that early on. And wouldn't it be so much better if people could get to the naturist level, like clothes? No, they don't matter. What matters is you, your heart, your soul, what's inside, not outside. And this whole body shaming thing, you said, that's a fairly recent thing. How far back do we go for the start of that?
Well, it's hard to know exactly, but certainly, the using of clothing for rank goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. But if you go back to even the 19th century, people generally didn't wear bathing suits.
Hmm.
In the Victorian times, the wealthy who went to the beach, the leisure classes, they had these bathing suits which were full, like up to the neck, down to the ankles, clothes, because certainly they were hiding the bodies, and they were. It wasn't just shame; it was propriety and class and rank more than anything else. But the lower classes were nude. You will, if you know older people, you might know that in households, the ones that lived in small uh, one or two bedroom apartments or farmhouses, they bathed in the open areas because you heated up the water over the stove. So the strong body shape that we have today is 100, 200 years old, really. That's the Romans, of course, had the Roman baths, and everybody wears nude together. Even in my generation, I'm 56 years old.
Hmm.
When I was younger, in the YMCA, which was men only, it was a young men's Christian association.
Right.
But the pools, you were not allowed to wear clothes. They didn't think it was hygienic.
That's true. Yeah.
So now, of course, even in men's locker room, everybody has cubicles in modern locker rooms,
That's true.
and so that body shame is getting stronger and stronger. So.
Oh yeah, very much so. I remember, even the Boys Club of America. It was pool time. You had to be nude. There were no suits
Right.
allowed for the same reasons the YMCA said. And even high schools in America. I don't know if it's the same worldwide or was the same in Canada, but there was mandatory nude swimming. If you took the swimming class, you had to be nude. When you swam in school, in public schools, until sometime in the 60s or 70s, it kind of faded away. People in school boards took it out because of all this nonsense, and oh my gosh, they have no clothes on. So lots of bad things are going to happen, even though nothing had gone wrong for 100 years or whatever.
Right.
Was that the case in Canada as well with your schools?
Yeah, yeah. When I went to school after gym, you had to take a shower, and it was a group shower. Now they don't, which is kind of like, after sweating and everything else, you're putting on your clean clothes and going to class.
That's true.
Teenagers, they're a lot of those hormones. It's good to have a shower once in a while.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I remember my basketball coach, and this was eighth grade, and we had a really good team. But at the tryouts, he said, we had like 50 guys trying out for 12 or 13 spots, and he said, he went through all the rules, and he said, here's what I expect. You have to do this, and you have to do that, and you have to work hard, and you will shower after each practice. And he said, after each tryout practice, if you don't shower, that's your way of telling me, his name was Mr. Davis. It'd be like telling me, Mr. Davis, I really don't want to be on this team at all. And believe me, I will honor your request. You won't make this team. So showering just wasn't a good idea. It was mandatory if you wanted to be on the team. And he kept that rule after every practice and after every game. And now these days, if you even begin to say those words to somebody in school, you're going to be either arrested or fired or just out of education for the good idea of showering after you get sweaty playing basketball. It's can you even begin to quantify how unbelievable that is? I certainly can't. Can you?
I mean, I understand why the world, I understand all these rules. I don't understand why everybody just accept them as if they are normal because they're the norm, but as if it's natural and that's the way we are. Even when when my kids were young, I was a beaver leaders. The beavers are the younger scouts, right? Beaver cubs and scouts. And we took them to a pool, and afterwards we were showering, and I took off my bathing suits, and the other leaders said, it was the men's area, of course, and then the other leader said, hey, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm showering. He says, well, you can't take your bathing suit off. I said, it's the men's locker room. Like, this is what we do. And they go, yeah, but what will the parents? Well, look, we're all together. Nothing's happening, obviously. Like, you guys are all witnesses. I'm just showering. What kind of example are we setting for these boys here? And as it was, these boys, there was one or two toilet stalls in the men's shower, and a whole lot of them lined up to go and change in their bathing suits in those two stalls. It took forever, and of course we weren't going to say, well, no, take your clothes off here because, oh my God, now they would go tell our parents that the leaders told them to take their clothes off. So we waited while they all changed. But it's unbelievable to me that we are going backwards with our body acceptance and body shame. And I mean, obviously, I'm doing what I'm doing to try to change that, but I'm finding a very, very powerful force in society.
Oh yeah, yeah, quite true. Now here's the part I don't get in movies. Is that, let's say around 1970 or so, maybe a little before that, nudity began to creep in, and now it's hard to find a movie that doesn't have nudity, and sometimes
Hmm.
rather graphic nudity. Full frontal nudity, men and women, as well as the backsides. And yet we went the other way with naturism. Okay, we can be naked on screen all we want, but oh boy, better not shower in an actual locker room because that's bad.
Hmm.
I just can't put those two together. Does that make any sense to you?
No, it doesn't. Well, yes and no. I mean, the nudity in movies and some of the stuff, much of it is sexual and exploitive, right?
Yeah.
And so it became a thing that actors had to be paid a lot more to do, and a lot of them avoided it because there was a stigma around it and that kind of thing. So we have, of course, this is the problem. We have a very hard time separating our natural body, i.e., nudity, from sexuality. The two are so intrinsically linked that people just, if they think of the idea of children nude, they think of pornography.
Hmm.
Of course, that's not true.
Right.
It wasn't when I was young, and it was not unusual to see a nude child on the beach because they don't need a bathing suits. They don't like to wear bathing suits,
Hmm.
and so young children often ran around naked. Nobody went, "Oh my God!"
Right.
And my sister wore the same bathing suit that I did, which is a little brief, a little
Yeah.
Speedo type bathing suits when we were young, because, well, she basically looked like me
Yeah.
at the top
Right.
until puberty.
Right.
Now you would never see that.
Right.
And I understand we suddenly admitted that there were bad people and predators out there, right?
Yeah.
When I was young, unfortunately, if something happened, you said, well, okay, don't say anything about it, right? And
Yeah.
we kind of talk about some weird uncle or this weird guy who lived in town, and just we stay away from him.
Mhm.
And that was all that people kind of buried this abuse that happened, and that was horrible. That was a bad thing to do.
Oh yeah.
So, in an attempt to protect children, we said, oh well, that we can't have children being nude because that's what attracts them. It's not true. It's not true, right? Pedophiles are attracted by children for the wrong reasons,
Right.
the wrong kind of attraction, of course, because it is normal to think children are cute. It's quite another to hurt them and abuse them, obviously.
Hmm.
So pedophiles are attracted to children. If you took away every nude picture that exists in the world, there would still be the same number of pedophiles. It doesn't create pedophiles.
Right.
What we're doing is we're attacking the victims instead of dealing with the issue. And a nude child on the beach is not going to cause them to be harmed. It's not going to be a problem. And
Right.
In fact, people often at Bear Oaks, we have lots of children, and they're shocked by that. Somebody just commented on our Facebook page the other day, just 2 days ago, about how they thought that was horrible for the children and how they were all going to be harmed. Uh, you know, pedophiles need to be alone with children. That's what they need, right? Which is why, unfortunately, it happens in sports and in churches and like where there's a youth group, or in schools or whatever. It's places where an adult who has bad intention is left in a position of power over the children and alone. In a naturist environment or a beach or any place else, you're with your parents or guardians, and there's lots of people around, so nothing's going to happen, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that's the logic is clear, but somehow until you mention it, people don't really get that.
To me, it's the same with adults. A guy who is, wants to attack a woman or abuse women or rape women, he goes to the grocery store and sees some really good looking woman, fully clothed. You're always clothed when you go grocery shopping. He decided at some point to make a move on her. Always made a move on a clothed person, not a naturist.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, exactly.
Right.
And it's also the same as saying, if women didn't wear short skirts, they wouldn't be sexually assaulted. Of course, that's ridiculous. They're not asking for it. Yeah, and if wearing clothes prevented assault, we wouldn't have a problem.
Yeah, right.
Chill-
No murder, no nothing. right?
No, there would be no child abuse. There would be none of that. Obviously, it doesn't work, right? That's not the and if only nudity was sexual, then we would never get turned on by anybody if they're wearing clothes, and clearly that does not happen either.
Yeah, I wonder if some of it might be a lot of it's just an easy way to throw it off to the side. Well, they're naked. That's why that happened. And now they can go on and have a nice lunch because they figured out all of the world's problems as opposed to it had nothing to do with them being nude. It had to do with this
Yeah,
guy's, he's mentally deranged, but that would take too much time and energy to discuss, right?
yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it doesn't mean you shouldn't have any take any precautions. That you shouldn't be careful about things. That not at all. But it just means you shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater, to use an old expression, right? You have to understand what the problem is. There are bad drivers in the world. That doesn't mean we should get rid of cars. There are, don't blame everybody else or don't inconvenience everybody else or hurt everybody else, because I think body shaming hurts people and hurts children, because there are bad people. Deal with the bad people, deal with the problem,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
not by blaming the victim or inconveniencing the victim, or limiting the freedoms of the victims, of the people in general.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. We're talking to Stéphane Deschênes this morning. I hope I kind of sort of said that name correctly. And he and his wife own Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park north of Toronto. And so, what goes on, Stéphane, at your family naturist park? I'm guessing that there are two types of people to start with: those who enter the park and take their clothes off and enjoy everything you have to offer, whether it's volleyball, swimming, you name it. You don't force them to take their clothes off as soon as they walk in. So is that basically kind of sort of at least how it begins?
Yeah, I mean, we try to have, once you're used to not wearing clothes, then it's just a regular facility to a certain extent. You can camp, you can be very active and play sports, or you can chill out and read a book, or whatever you like to do. In terms of first experience, yeah, that's a good question. We are not clothing optional, which is something that was started, a well-intentioned thought in the 80s or 90s, to try to be more free and let people do what they want to do. The problem that I found in a lot of others is that it you lost the concept of equality, which is very important naturism. That you don't have the uh, uh, essentially a voyeur exhibitionist relationship when one's dressed and one's not. It also attracts people who just want to look, who are there for the wrong reason. If you don't have to take your clothes off, it's easy to go, and it becomes a show, and that's really uncomfortable for the people who want to be comfortable in their own skin. So we're not clothing optional. But we do allow people time to adjust. We'll say, okay, just find a quiet corner. Don't go like walk around everywhere looking at everybody with your clothes on. But find a corner. If it takes you all day, that's fine. Put out a towel, sit down, look around, think about it. Because the reality is that most people, when they get there, knowing that, uh, are uncomfortable with their clothes on almost immediately because nobody else is wearing any clothing. They come into the office and the staff is not wearing clothing behind the front desk. This happens very frequently. People come in from their car fully dressed, see everybody, go back to their car, take their clothes off, and finish their registration.
Well, that's, you just said it a moment ago. That might be the best way to say it all. It's just, you're just enjoying life. You're just walking around the park, you're swimming, you're reading a book, you're having some lemonade. You just don't have your clothes on. And I wonder if there's something to that. If you know about this, you probably do because this is your main deal in life right now. Business wise, I talked to this lady who claims to be, and I don't know her background totally, but a holistic health person. And she talked about earthing quite a bit, and there's another name for it, where every day, minimally, you should go outside barefooted and just walk in the grass for a while or in the dirt because, and she got into the reasons why. But of course, she recommends if you can be fully nude and lie down on the ground, whether it's your backyard or at the beach, where you can do it legally and not get in trouble, there's something to that. I mean, have you found that? Is that something you personally talk about or your people talk about? As a naturist, when I'm at the park or wherever I am, let's just say you're at the park, your park, the Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park in north of Toronto, and I have my clothes off and I'm walking around. I just feel more in tune with what's going on around me. Life is more pleasant. I feel better about myself. Is that part of it too?
Well, you definitely feel better about yourself when you realize that every body is unique, and this attempt at in society to try to all look the same is wrong because it's impossible. So you definitely feel better about yourself right off the bat because of that. Um, and you feel accepted because society does not accept people well for what they look like, because of what we see. It's not that people necessarily tell you you're ugly, but the imagery, the messaging in media, and in marketing and advertising very much makes you feel that way, that there's an ideal apparently you're supposed to try to look like. So you feel better about who you are. You do. I mean, there's my experience, but there's also a lot of experiences that people have told me. Like, you do feel your whole skin is a sensory
Yeah,
organ,
yeah,
right?
right.
And when you wear clothing, you're muffling that. You can't feel anything, and suddenly you feel the sun, you feel the wind, you feel the water, entirely on your entire body. And yeah, it is an all-encompassing experience that way, and it is a very sensory experience that's really wonderful. And I think a lot of people know that because they enjoy going skinny dipping. They just can't imagine going beyond doing it in the dark, maybe, or with only a few people. And so it is a wonderful experience. But there's also that psychological effect, which I think is actually bigger, which is you're opening yourself up. Gone are your feelings of shame, because obviously you cannot be,
Mm-hmm.
because you see everybody, you are who you are, and everybody's talking to you like you're a normal person.
Mm-hmm.
Gone is the status and rank of others,
Right.
and you present your true authentic self. Why is it your authentic self? Well, because you are the airs, the pretenses have to be gone, right? You're not wearing, like you were talking about being dressed up and how people react to you. It's true. Okay, if I walk in someplace with a t-shirt, I will be looked at a certain way. If my t-shirt has a collar on it, now I'm better. I'm a better person, and I'll get more respect. But if I tie a little piece of clothing around that collar, and that dangles down in front of my chest, now I'm really fancy, and I will get more respect, right? And as a result, I might feel more important because of that, and because we get confidence out of our clothes. But the true self, the true confidence, only comes when the clothes are gone. And so, over and over and over, people report that they have truer conversation. They feel closer to people almost instantly, like they've known each other for a long time, because well, they don't know it, but they assume it's because they're all not wearing clothes, and it's a fascinating phenomenon.
I saw there was a video of you being interviewed by a woman, and I don't remember her name, and I'm not even sure how long ago it was. I don't think that it was all that long ago, but you were both sitting on the ground and, both apparently nude.
Oh yes, yep,
I mean,
yep.
you from the waist up, and she had her knees propped up in such a way that, it was totally appropriate. But it was
Mhm.
very appropriate, intellectually stimulating conversation because it was just two people talking in a park. There was nothing weird about it. There was nothing untoward about it. It's nothing you
Mhm.
wouldn't show your kids. And I'm guessing that's exactly what goes on at Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. Lots of conversations like that. We're just people enjoying each other and enjoying life, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Yeah, and she was a young woman, and people might say, "Well, how could you be nude with her and not be all turned on by everything?" And I would say, just like when you hang out with anybody who is attractive, there's, of course, there are people. Some people you are attracted to some people more than others. There's no question about that. It's certainly that there is. It would be wrong to say that there is no sexuality at all, because we are sexual animals,
Mm-hmm.
but it is ironically probably less sexual than wearing a bikini,
Mm-hmm.
or because a woman in a bikini is kind of emphasizing the parts that we're theoretically supposed to hide, because you're putting bright colors that stand out against your body on those parts. And then you're making it a bit of a tease by partially hiding them.
Right.
So, when you're one body, one person, it's very comfortable and very casual and normal. And yeah, and so you have great conversations and great chats.
Yeah, I also read an article as a woman from a newspaper who interviewed you, and I don't have that in front of me, so I don't know her name or the name of the paper. But she started off the conversation basically saying, you notice he's a very nice man. He's a very professional man. You notice his mustache. And she said it wasn't until several minutes in, she said, oh, I realized also he has no clothes on or something like that, words to that effect. But that's probably the goal of the whole naturist deal is like, we don't even think about it. We just do it. It's not something abnormal or weird. It's just, hi, my name is Stéphane. and your name is whatever, and let's have a conversation. We have no clothes on, but we don't even acknowledge that because it's just natural. That's probably the ultimate goal, right?
Yes, it is. And in fact, another reporter once told me, I said, it's like you don't know you're naked. Um,
Yeah.
and I say, and yeah, I'm very aware, but yeah, I don't, I'm
Right.
very comfortable that way. And that's the difference.
Mhm.
Because for most people, being naked is, you would be hyper aware of that because you would feel exposed and vulnerable and like you are breaking an enormous social taboo.
Mhm.
But in naturism, that's gone, and
Right.
that's incredibly liberating, because ultimately it is comfortable. It is the way we are meant to be. Um, so once you can get over that shame that's has been beaten into you since you were a small child, when you did enjoy it and you didn't know you were supposed to be ashamed, it's like going back to that time, and that's wonderful.
All right. Well, now we're at your place, the Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park, a little bit north of Toronto. How can people get involved, or do they show up for a day and like get a day pass? Do they show up for a week and they live there year round? What kind of facilities do you have for people?
Yeah, you can't live there, because we're not zoned for residential use. We're zoned only for recreational use, but you can come as often as you want. It's like a second home if you have a trailer there permanently. Unfortunately, we have a very long waiting list. It's actually ridiculous. If you put, there's so many people who want to really. If you put your name on a list today, it'd be 20 years before you got a place because nobody gives up their trailer. Like one a year is sometimes none. Nobody's given up a site this year. So we have to expand, but you don't. We keep sites for short term use. So you can always come up. We have 870 something members. I don't remember the exact number, and most of them, obviously, with 125 sites, don't have a permanent site, so they can come for a short term. But we get thousands of day visitors, and you're most welcome to come for the day. We're not that far from Toronto, so if you're in the Toronto area, it's a half an hour to an hour ride, and so you come for the day. And if you're a member, you just show up. But for visiting for first time, you don't need an appointment. You just have to come during our business hours. For members, we're open 24/7, but for non-members, you have to come. Right now is between 9 a.m. and 7 p.m.
Okay, I think you just said it, but just to clarify it for myself, people who own a trailer or some kind of RV or whatever, they can park it, and they can, if they can get a spot,
Yes.
they can park it and reserve it and stay there. They can leave it there forever. Just basically come and go as they please, or do they have to?
It's an annual contract for if you have a long term site,
Mhm.
and that's where the big demand is because people love to be there.
Sure.
It's their weekend getaway, not very far from the city, and in the middle of a place with a small lake and pool and restaurant and hot tub and saunas and all that stuff and lots of activities. So yeah, I think we've built something really wonderful, and that's why people want to be there. But if you have an RV, if you have a trailer or a motorized RV, and or even a tent, you can come up for the weekend. However, because we've been so popular, which I'm very happy, of course, that we are, you need to highly recommend a reservation. We run out of sites pretty regularly, even the short-term sites. We also have cabins and guest rooms, and those are booked pretty solidly on weekends. Tenting, though, we without services, we always have space. There's 50 acres, so if somebody shows up with just a tent and they don't need a site with electricity, there's always a spot. At least at this point, I suppose eventually we might run out of space there too. But there's a lot of big open spaces and on lawns where somebody can tent. So that's the one option right now that is still no reservation required.
Okay, and there you go. Part one of my interview with Stéphane Deschênes. He owns Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park near Toronto. Check it out and get there and say hello to him and enjoy the amenities that it provides for you in the world of naturism. He also has his own podcast show, The Naturist Living Show. You can find that wherever podcasts happen to be available. And he's the president of the International Naturist Federation. We will get to part two of my interview with Stéphane Deschênes on next week's show. And again, you've been listening to Naked, Nudists, and Naturists. Brand new show every Saturday morning to celebrate clothes-free living. Tune in early and often, and also email us early and often as well at nakedforevermore at gmail.com. Again, you've been listening to Naked, Nudists, and Naturists, Episode 3. Plan to join us for every single one of our shows here and have your clothes off when you're listening. We have our clothes off when we're broadcasting, enjoying the naturist life.
We celebrate clothes-free living for all. Remember to enjoy being naked and join us again for Naked, Nudist, and Naturist.
We drop a brand new show every Saturday morning, so come back and join us. Have your clothes off when you do for Naked, Nudists, and Naturists. Have a great clothes-free day.